What is your sense of what the chronic suicidalness is? Like, how long has that been there? Is it still here? Like, what is it? Like, myself, I had suicidal ideation when I was around 33 because I was stopping an eating disorder but not doing it the right way. So I was almost like a dry drunk. So I just was a beast of a human being to be around, and started to have suicidal ideation. And I was like, oh, this is different. Haven't had this before. And then the second time I had it very intensely was when I was in treatment. And that was really a result of like emotionally experiencing things I had not been able to experience, and the tremendous like grief and regret around life choices I had made that had landed me in a very impoverished, like socially, work, everything. You know, I was a very impoverished, sort of small, limited life space, you know, and just not knowing how I could possibly like get myself out of it, and sort of really confronting all of the damage I had done, you know, to relationships and people, and just the level of loss. But I'm curious with you, what is your understanding of it? When did it start? Are you in it right now? Does it ebb and flow?
So I only remember like one instance in high school. One night before I went to bed, I like was like, oh, if I take some aspirin, maybe I'll not wake up. But like, fortunately, I did, because aspirin can be really, really, really bad if people overdose. So I didn't take a lot at all, but that was like, it doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. The point is that was the first time where I ever like had that thought about, taking my own life or not being alive. I assume it was around in college, but I can't really remember that time as much, but for sure it was around in med school and residency and fellowship, my first fellowship. For me, I feel like my chronic suicidal ideation was very much so directly correlated to how much I hate myself or hated myself. I would say I went from having suicidal thoughts in bad times 3 to 5 times a week. I mean, that's probably a lot, but just let's say 3 times a week. And then during good times, at least once a month. Mm-hmm. But now, like, I can't distinctly remember the last time, so it's been months. So that's like pretty incredible.
But here's my question, and I don't understand this, and I want to understand it. What do you mean by hate yourself? Because like, I don't really understand that. And it doesn't mean that I haven't, I think I've experienced self-hate or whatever, but I can't, it's such a sort of trope. Can you break it down? Like, give me an example of what that like looks like, because it's so abstract actually.
So I have 2 examples. So whenever I was younger, like, I don't know if you know how, like, when people look at a clock and it's like 11:11 and you make a wish, the wish that I would have would be, I wish I'm pretty smart and skinny, because I felt like if I was these things, people may like me. And I just felt like I was never pretty enough, smart enough. And I know that sounds so stupid saying that out loud, but I just always felt like I wasn't enough. I wasn't enough for people to like me. I just felt like everything about me was like subpar, and then also just like the kind of like this hypersensitivity. Like, you could read somebody's body language and see that they were like sad or angry or irritated, but then my brain would automatically be like, it's because of you did something wrong, you hurt somebody, you said something stupid, and so everything that is wrong or bad in a relationship is because of me. And so when you're constantly on the outlook for what you perceived yourself to have done wrong, how can you like that person? Because you're just wrong. And so you look at a clock, I wish I was pretty smart and skinny, you know, and it's just like very like, it's all in your head, and then you can't ever escape it. So that's what I mean by self-hate. It's like, you're the perpetrator because you're doing things wrong, and then you can't ever escape it because you're always, because then after that interaction that went bad, you go home and you think about it. And so when people would say that, like, oh, why don't you leave that at work, or and I could not fathom the capacity to compartmentalize emotions and thoughts to where it wouldn't follow me everywhere I went. And so that's what I mean.
when I was in treatment, you know, they would try to teach us like emotions are like a wave, you know, and they come and go. And I was like, no, they're not. No, they're not. Like, mine aren't. You know, and like I would have to do all these cognitive things. I'd have to like be like, no, this will go, this will go, this will go. But I'd have to do like cognitive fixes to manage the problem of that the feelings don't feel like they will pass. And it's hard to compartmentalize them and then like move on to something else. If it has to do with something I've done that I'm not proud of having done, and I'm very much upset about it, it then encompasses like the all of who I am. You know, it's like the most prominent feature of who I am. And it's, so is that sort of what you're talking about? I'm trying to like frame the experience of how that would generate this feeling of badness, and that feeling of badness for you then moves you into a space of suicidal ideation. Is that true? So is it because you can't then find a way to escape the feeling? Like, what's the relationship between the badness and the suicidal ideation? I think that's my question. Took me a while to get there. Sorry.
Even though like intellectually, the more wisdom you have with life, you have more life experience, and you know that like theoretically things are gonna end, like everything comes to an end, like stuff, you know, whatever. The hardest part is that it's just so intense. It's so much. It's so overwhelming. Like, and then also whenever I said that point about like in the interaction, me always kind of blaming myself and asking myself what I did wrong, there's always the other foot that drops, which is that resentment. So I'm resentful because I'm like, why don't they like me? Why do they like this other person, but this other person? And just causes this whole like crazy realm of thoughts when this person probably didn't think two things about it. But for me, it's like, I'm like hyper thinking about what I possibly did wrong, and then I'm like upset because I've been feeling this way all day. And it's like, why do I feel this way all day? And then like, well, why don't they like me? Like, is you know, they're hanging, you know. And so it's just, and then so I would get angry. The bottom line is that I would get angry, and then for me, anger was considered to be a bad emotion. So not only did I do something wrong in that interaction, but the bottom line is I would have this residual anger. And so just feeling like I was this angry, bitter person, but then people would see this version of me that's like, oh, well, Tiffany, like, you're a good doctor, you're really passionate, you care about people, and all of these positive things, but I felt like I knew the real me. And the real me is this like troll, this angry troll that nobody really knows about, so therefore nobody really knows me, and it just makes me feel even more isolated. And when you feel isolated and like you don't have anybody who truly understands you, then it's like all of those things together. It's the overwhelming emotion, it's the feeling of badness, like I'm bad, but it's also the sense of like isolation, like that sense of what people say whenever you're in a crowded room but you feel alone. That's kind of what BPD is like, because like when you talk, you get it. When Charlotte talks, she gets it. But when you try to talk to people who don't get it, sometimes it unintentionally like makes things worse.
Sure.
Because it's like, well, why don't you just stop thinking this? Or why do you think that way? Or why do you like let this happen? And then it just once again becomes like a me problem, you know? And so you don't want to share it with other people. And so just the bottom line is that, in my opinion, until you kind of like, for me, having those criteria of BPD really allowed for me to understand myself in a way that I've never understood myself before. And that allowed for me to work on skills that legitimately would help those interactions. Like, do I still battle those crazy thoughts? Yeah, absolutely. But do I feel like it's as debilitating? No, I don't.